Good afternoon. This is the third and final breakout session of this incredible day, and I'm looking forward very much to this special session. I'm Bob Abdikar, one of the proud sponsors of Z3, and we'll have an opportunity at this time to reflect on everything that we've learned today from the different programs. We have had over 1,000 participants in these programs from Israel, from all around the U.S., and from other countries. Please silence your cell phones, a standard admonition. There will be a Q&A at the end, and after this program there is the final plenary session, which we have the shortest walk to get to. Now let's go to the final breakout session. From state building to society building, can diaspora Jews get involved in Israeli society? I suppose we should say can or should they get involved in Israeli society? If Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people, then what is the place of world Jewry in shaping the impact on American society and Israeli society? To discuss this, we have a panel of Rabbi Amichai Lau-Lavie, who's the founding spiritual leader of Lab Shul, New York City, and the creator of Storytelling, Inc. Professor Yuval Elbashon, who is Ono Academic College's Dean of the Faculty of Law, which is Israel's largest law faculty, focusing specifically on making the legal academy accessible to ultra-Orthodox Arabs and Ethiopian Jews in Israel. Rabbi Josh Weinberg, who's VP for Israel and Reform Judaism at the Union for Reform Judaism and president of ARZA. And the moderator of the panel is Rachel Fishman Feddersen, the publisher and CEO of The Forward, who has been an innovator in digital media since the earliest days of Silicon Valley. And you can read more about each of the speakers in the Connects Me tab. So thank you, and to Rachel.
All right, are we on? Are we on? Okay. So hello, everyone. Thank you for the stamina you've shown by lasting to this final session and coming to hear us talk to each other about can and should Americans be involved in Israel? If so, how? It's an easy question with really quick answers, so we won't be here for very long.
So no, goodbye.
But I think this is a good group because we have some deep Israel knowledge here with our guy who still lives in Israel, guy who grew up in Israel, guy who didn't grow up in Israel but lives in Israel a lot.
Made Aliyah.
Right.
Yeah.
But still lives in Park Slope.
And back.
Okay. So anyway, we have a sort of deep knowledge of Israel here and America, which is what's required for this conversation. So I think we should have, and you've all said you didn't want to start, so I'm not going to start with you, but we can start with a basic opener of should, before we talk about how, should American Jews be involved with Israel? Maybe everybody's here this weekend because they think the answer is no. Josh?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having us on the panel here. It's wonderful to be here in Palo Alto. I'm coming from New York, for Israel, and to my esteemed colleagues, Amichai is one of my teachers, and getting to know and learn a lot from Yuval. I approach it sort of differently. I want to take a step back, actually, before we say yes or no, they can or they cannot, and to say like this. I think that just being Jewish is involved in having three sacred relationships. We say it in sort of traditional language, Yisrael, Oraita, and Kucha B'richu, that to be a Jew is to have a relationship with God, a relationship with Torah, and a relationship with Israel. And we could go one by one with all of us, and we probably would not agree on our theology or how we might interpret Torah, whether it's a narrative and whether it's halakha and all of those things that we might see very, very differently. The same goes for Israel, where our relationship might change depending on who we are. However, unlike the show Survivor, you don't have an option to kick any of them off the island. So I think that, yes, not only, so what does it mean to have a relationship with Israel? I don't think it's a yes or no, should we or should we not. The question is, yes, we should have a relationship with Israel. Now, exactly what does that mean? So first thing, yes, I think that the two major Jewish communities should be deeply, deeply involved with each other, Israel and North America. And instead of asking how, it's not even a question for me, should we dictate policy or wave our finger and say no, as one to the other, to what we may perceive as being doing wrong or not doing wrong. But really, what do we have to offer each other? And what has our experience as we've grown and evolved in very different contexts and very different locations and very different narratives, what do we have to offer each other from that experience? Okay, what does it mean to live in a sovereign Jewish society, let's say sovereign Jewish political entity that is building a Jewish society, versus living as Jews in a minority, whether successful or not, right? Outside the land, in a non-Jewish host society. Those two things have influences so deeply, and I think we have a great deal to offer one another. Especially, I focus on the area of religion and how that plays out. And I think that what does it mean to be Jewish in the Jewish state has a lot to learn from the diaspora and has a great deal to offer also to the diaspora. So I think that we need to start looking at those things and see how they intertwine. And see how we both support and learn and teach from one another. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll have more to say.
All right, thank you. Amichai?
Ditto on the thanks, and good to be here.
Yeah.
After a really rich day of conversation so far. I want to give like a teeny reality check and a story to back things up, because I think stories are helpful in complicated realities. The reality check is that I got an email today from a gay Israeli couple whose baby I helped convert in New York a few months ago, and they're now back in Israel, and my conversion with two other illustrious conservative rabbis was not certified by the Interior Ministry. Number one. A friend of mine who's an Orthodox Jew who made Aliyah 30 years ago and has been living there for all these years was accosted today at the Western Wall by supporting the women of the wall and being threatened with death by a number of ultra-Orthodox men while the police stood by. And another friend of mine just last week was stopped at the border because she was suspected of being a pro-BDS supporter. She's not. So let's just talk about the fact that for me and my friends and my colleagues, the question of are we going to be involved in Israel on civic, political, religious fronts is confronted with a reality where we're being told, maybe by the government, maybe by the officials, maybe by some people on the ground, stay away. We don't want you, we don't need you. My rabbinate is not recognized, and my conversions or marriages is not welcomed in Israel. And I'm someone who grew up in Israel, served in the IDF, believe in Israel's right to exist and continue, and in religious pluralism. So there's a question of we can talk here till we're green in the face about should or can. The reality is that we're often told, please stay away. So on the one hand, there's two realities. And so the question is, how do we bridge? So here comes the story, which is my favorite recent story to deal with all things complicated. And this is a traditional Jewish story from the canon of the Chelm stories. Chelm, a mythic city in our tradition, decided to build a bridge over the river that leads into the city. As is the case in Chelm, and in some construction policies, let's not get stereotypical, the bridge was built badly, and every single person who crossed the bridge into Chelm, or most people, fell off the bridge and hurt themselves. After the 100th person hurt themselves, the Chelm community elders got together to say, what do we do about the fact that people are getting hurt and this bridge is badly built? And they sat and they had like conferences and festivals, and they decided that they have the solution. They raised a lot of money and they built a hospital right next to the bridge so that everybody who falls off the bridge can be healed, and they were very happy and the hospital was built. So I'm saying this because we're asking ourselves today a lot of questions, and there's many elephants in the room, about why is it that there's not a lot of people here under the age of 30 in this conference, and why people like me, 30, some my friends, hi guys, but not a lot of us. And what is it that we're not talking about, but why is it that the American Jewish community is either being asked to stay away or is not showing up? So there, we can talk about hospitals and fixing and 3.0 and 4.0 a lot. But let's go back and ask, what's the project? What's really wrong here in the communication? And what can we fix before we start building new enterprises? And that story, the reason I love it so much is because it is inherently about the concept of a bridge. And if we're no longer one entity, and we're not, then the question is, what kind of bridges will we build? Because it's got to be that. We're not one thing. How do we build a bridge, and how is the bridge real dialogue? How is it not the question, can Israelis accept American or world Jewry, or how can American Jewry really welcome the Israeli dialogue so it's this way? And we've got historical models for that. The Babylonian Jerusalem model, the Bavli Yerushalmi, was a Talmudic debate that lasted for hundreds of years, where it was on some level reciprocated, where we are in some way, we're in a paradigm shift, where it's no longer about a center and a periphery, it's about two centers and a bridge. But we got to ask the question of what's wrong here, so we don't just keep on fixing a bridge, but build it right. And maybe that's the opportunity here.
Thank you.
I have to say that.
So go ahead. This is Yuval, our one non-rabbi on the panel.
First of all, I want to apologize for my broken English. Now it's the jet lag, and it's only. And I have to say that one thing as a compliment to the organization and to the Z conference, that in the recent years, I didn't like to come to the States. Every time I came, I'm a human rights activist, I'm a community lawyer, and all the festivals and all the conference against, I'm the enemy. I'm from the bad Israel that is against gays, against Arabs, against Palestinians, against everything. And when you come, you are the immediate accused, even though you are from the left wing, even though you are, and I'm very proud to be IDF still, even though I'm 50, I'm an officer in the IDF. And every time I came, I have to say, it's a little bit traumatic for me. And when I came here, and I found the word Zionist, never mind, Z3, Z4, Z55, on the wall like that, especially in the Bay Area, it was something that I have to say thank you about it. Because it's a healing experience for post-traumatic guy like me. So first of all, thank you. Mm-hmm. Now, secondly, I have to say, I hear you, Amichai, and I was very sorry. I'm not an official Israeli. I'm not part of the government. I'm a rebellious lawyer. But still, I don't let anyone to define for me who is Israel. Like I don't let the rabbis tell me, you are not Jewish enough because I don't have a kippah. And I'm telling them, I am the one who defined myself. I'm a Jew, I'm a human rights, and I'm telling those guys, even from New York State, where my friends, they said, human rights, you should do 1, 2, 3, 4, and said, you are not the one to define to me. You shouldn't let them define to you who is Israeli and who is not Israeli. And Israel is your project, and I don't know who is welcoming or not welcoming. I consider myself as an Israeli, and I think I'm not unique, and I'm telling you, you are most welcome, and even most welcome. So it's not a bridge to the sea and nothing on the other side, it's vice versa. It's all, I think most of the people in Israel, again, I can see it in the polls, most of the people in Israel are for gay rights. They are against the rabbinical institution. They are against what's happening in the occupied territories. But they think differently from in other subjects. So it's not you should come and to your question, yes, you should get involved. Yes, you can, but please do it in a modest way. I have enough. I've been working in the civil society in Israel since '92. I was back, very tall, blonde, thin, and beautiful. And after 2 divorces, I became like that, like a sufganiyah. How you say sufganiyah? Donut?
Donut.
Nah, donut. Like black donut. This is my second ex-wife. She did it to me. No, just kidding. But and since then, I've been working with people from America. First of all, Israel is a Jewish state The first meaning, and I'm teaching all my students in constitutional court, constitutional course like that, the meaning is it's the house of all the Jews, all over the world. And it's not for us. This is a big debate in classes, but this is it. And you know that. So it's your house, you should come to help. When I'm saying modest, I mean don't come in paternalistic way, that you are coming and tell us how to do and what to do, and okay, you should act like that towards these Palestinians, and you should act like that too in the Kotel, in the Western Wall, and etc., and etc., etc. Yes, we need your help. We need your, most of it. We need your professional knowledge. At the end, we are 71 years old, state. Here, you know, we established a network of what we called citizens' rights centers, which is our like rights storefronts. We didn't invent anything. We took a project from here, from New York, called Bereshit, Genesis Project, that was from the Anti-Poverty Act of 1961. We took all the concept, we just translated from English to Hebrew, from American to Israeli, and we start to work on it. So we need your knowledge, but we need you to bring us the tool without telling us something about the clients, because the only thing that we do know is our client.
All
this
right.
is it for opening.
Okay.
Is my English understood?
לחלוטין. And you have the proper Israeli accent to remind us that it's a dialogue and it's good.
First, in 2 minutes I will say how do you are, and then it will be.
You are good. You are very good.
Okay, so some inside Israeli joke happening here that I don't get, but that's all right. Okay. I have a whole laundry list of questions about what needs are most urgent, what some of the pitfalls are of getting involved in Israel, because I have to be honest, I took it as a given the answer was going to be, should Americans be involved in Israel? Yes. Okay, and here are the particular ways how. But we have a couple of ways we can go here. We can get into a specific conversation about ways you've seen Americans being involved in Israel that have really worked or not worked. Or you can talk about sort of going a step further, because it actually is asked in our program. Can Americans be involved in leadership positions in Israel? Those are two, I think, separate questions. They're sort of part one, part two.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with...
Rachel, can I just ask a clarifying question in terms of what you mean by Americans? Because I don't think we're debating the memorandum of understanding of the American government towards the Israeli in terms of foreign aid and all those kinds of packages, although that could be a fair game question. And are we talking about American Jews specifically being involved in Israel?
Well, American Jews who made Aliyah. There's so many different nuances here.
I would also say that I definitely do not agree with all American Jews here in terms of their point of view. I spend a lot of time sitting at very large, potentially antiquated Zionist and Jewish organizations here in the United States, where when I make statements similar to the ones that Amichai made in the beginning, I am definitely the lone wolf, even though in my movement I'm fairly representative of those sentiments. And they say, well, if you're getting involved in Israel, we don't want you. And I said, well, I don't want you voting either. You know, I think what you're saying is highly, highly problematic. And there's this, I think, a very, very strong tension of certain American Jews. For instance, the current ambassador to Israel from the United States, David Friedman, right, who was the head of the American Friends of Beit El. Okay, I might disagree with his American involvement in terms of what's going on. And I think that we should call out one of the elephants in the room, and that is money, right? I'm proud of the fact that Israel has the largest NGO per capita rate in the world. okay? And every day another do-gooder is starting another organization of how can I change the world and how can I improve Israeli society. And a week after those NGOs are formed, they also formed an AF NGO, right? The American Friends of that organization, in which they come here to say, support my organization because it reflects your values, right? And so my question to Yuval might be, say, okay, if that, right, in the same breath, yeah, and I'm sure that Michlelet Ono has an American Friends of. It does not. Okay.
I think not.
It might be unique in that aspect
does it backstage.
Yeah.
It's okay.
And then to say, we're happy for you to donate lots of money. Don't be modest in your donations, in your involvement there, but be modest with your opinions. And so my question is, why does it bother you, aside from the obvious fact that we're not, that President Company excluded, because Amichai and I both served in the army and vote in the elections, but the majority of American Jews who are not citizens and don't vote and don't serve and don't, why does it bother so much that people voice opinions about what's happening in Israel?
It doesn't bother me at all. If I'm saying that Israel it's a home for the Jewish people, it's their home as mine, so it's not a problem. Right. I'm meant for something else. I'm meant for something in a lower level. I'm meant to something professional. And we talked yesterday, Rachel and I spoke about, and I gave her an example. We walked in Lakia. Lakia, it's a village, Bedouin village next to Wat. And I had the same example in ultra-Orthodox, with ultra-Orthodox women in Jerusalem, but I'll tell you something about Lakia. And we wanted to make something that called empowering women. You know, every decade we have a word, the trendy word. In between 90s and 2000, it was budgeting. Everyone in Israel learned to do budgeting. And then afterwards, everyone doing empowering. It's like the buzzword. And they came to us, and I told them, okay, if we want to do it in Lakia, we should separate gender separation. We should separate the women from the men. Otherwise, the women won't come. And someone who came, and she gave the money. It's okay. Okay, you know, without her, there is no project. Let's start from this point. And she said, I'm not allowing gender separation. And then she started to give me a lecture about Linda Brown, you know, Brown versus Board of Education. And we came back to May 17, 1954. And when Earl Warren came out and say, you know, it's not constitutional, it's inerrantic, and etc. And she was right. But in the Bedouin society, to say that, it's to impose value that it's not fitable. And at the end, we did one course. No women came. And we lost all the goals that we wanted didn't work for that example. And it's the same now with the ultra-Orthodox. And to this modesty I meant. I want you to come, I need your money. I want you to come to give me professional help, because I don't know. I need the tools. But you know, when you are having the tool, there is a different, how to use it. With the same tool, I can use it differently with one client and other client. So for that modesty, I'm saying.
Something onto that, which is, you know, when I first thought about how to answer this question, and only for the sake of being like a troublemaker, which I do like to do in my spare time.
No, you're not.
No, on my spare time. You know, there is a level in which, and my Reform rabbi colleague and friend will forgive me, that as an Israeli growing up in Israel, Orthodox, unhappy with the way I was in Orthodoxy, I started looking left and right to find other solutions. And back in the 80s and the early 90s, Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist was pretty small and heavily American. So to find a Judaism that spoke to me, it had American values, it had a heavy American accent, and it had some of the sensibilities, like the story you're talking about, this woman's conviction, that didn't quite speak to who I was as an Israeli Jewish, newly openly gay, looking for a way to be who I am as an Israeli liberal Jew. It took me a long journey. It took me coming to America to find my Judaism, become a Jew as a liberal, outspoken, convinced of this path, and then start doing it back in Israel. Now when I go back to Israel, I get a lot of, on the one hand, yearning and welcome. We need you here, but we need you here without an accent. We need you here as an organic, inherent, and I agree, indigenous Israeli Judaism that drinks from the wells of civil rights, pluralism, feminism, queer consciousness, all the values of American consciousness, not just American, but also primarily. We want it there, but it's got to be transplanted and organically grown in Hebrew with an Israeli accent and with an Israeli sensibility to the complications and the actual conditions of Israeli culture. So my answer would be no. Israel does not need American Jewish leaders to come and say, hey, let's teach you how to do Jewish in Israel. It's the last thing Israelis want. But what Israelis do need and want, Israeli society rather, are the ideas and the money, the wisdom. And then it becomes tricky, because on the one hand you're telling us, but easy on your opinions. And on the other hand, you're telling us, easy on your accent. But we want what you have to offer us. So I think we're at this moment now, at least as far as the movements, that there's beginning to be homegrown, grassroots,
right.
Israeli religious leaders in the vast area of liberal movements who are Israeli born, who speak Hebrew without an accent, who learned from American institutions, but who can speak to and with the Israeli mindset eye to eye. And that's true in the religious sphere, that's true in the civil rights sphere, that's true in the political sphere, right? But I think we're at this paradigm shift moment where both the Israelis and the Americans are beginning to understand that you can't just translate and transplant American concepts and people to an Israeli reality without a radical shift.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm
It's not gonna work.
Can I add into that? Okay.
Let me just jump
Yeah,
in
sure,
for
sure.
a moment to say, very good point, thank you, Josh, just hold that thought. Because I think what we would like to get here, I suspect what a lot of people in the room might like by the end of this session, is to walk out with a little bit of a deeper understanding of what can I do? I'm not a rabbi, I'm not deeply, I care about this issue, that's why I'm here, but maybe I'm not going to move to Israel for 2 years and take an ulpan and lose my accent. What can I do? And so if there are specific examples, I think it's very interesting to hear about the people who are born in Israel and have learned from the American traditions. Is there any concrete, an example, advice for people in the room about, what do I do next week? I didn't want to cut off your thought.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. First of all, so the first thing I would say are all the basic things, and I think that for this crowd who comes to Zionism, takes a Sunday or even 2 days to come to this conference, that may already be obvious, some of the basic things like spend time in Israel, education, follow the news, all those kinds of things, and go back and forth. As we like to say here, it's not galut if you commute. To really have that back and forth relationship and understand what's going on in each other's culture. And the second thing I would say is that my comment about the money, don't misunderstand. Money is really important. I would like there to be another mega donor who buys a newspaper and calls it Yisrael Machar, and to do that. I think that we have to support the institutions on the ground that, I look at myself and I spend a lot of time trying to build the reform movement in Israel because exactly what Amichai said, and that now 13% of Israelis identify somehow with reform and conservative Judaism in Israel. That doubled actually in the past 5 years, according to the recent statistics that came out 6 weeks ago.
13 is post-double?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We gotta
By the way,
double.
11% identify with Haredi Judaism in Israel. Okay. Now, identify and affiliate, those have different meanings here versus there. They're not all like dues-paying, members of congregations like we may understand it here. And it may mean that, my wife's best friend's sister's coworker went to a wedding where there was a woman rabbi, and something, it was really nice. And I said, what did you expect? And they said, I don't know. It was very scary for me to walk into that situation. And we're hearing all sorts of anecdotes about that. But I do think that here's sort of big gadol that may be beyond each individual. But I think that what Israelis are coming to two conclusions. One, that, say it like this, the polarizing dichotomy between religious and secular no longer answers the needs of the mainstream. Okay? Aleph. Bet is that having a Jewish state doesn't necessarily mean having a Jewish community. And so I think that the same reason that diaspora Jews go to shul and belong to a Jewish community are the same things that Israelis are looking for. A friend of mine came back from their post-army trip to India, and they said, wow, we discovered spirituality, and isn't it a shame that we don't have that in Judaism? And we said, well, okay, actually, let me introduce you to those things that weren't available to you in the 80s and 90s, and now they are becoming more. And in my Israeli rabbinic program, I was the minority for having Aleph grown up in the Reform movement and speak Hebrew with an American accent, as I do, whatever. And so what I'm thinking that we in the diaspora have been very good at developing Jewish community in a privatized economy. Okay? Where the government does not support any religion. Look at this campus that we're sitting on. It's unbelievable. Okay? And you built it yourselves because it was really important to you. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that Israel tomorrow should become some pure Jeffersonian democratic model of the separation of religion and state. I don't think that's going to happen, nor necessarily should it. And there are other models out there. But what I'm saying is that to export some of the model of let's build it ourselves, that I think is the modern day, chalutzim sort of mentality, that's what it means to be a pioneer. I see from my classmates and my colleagues who are out there building Jewish communities, and not only in the main centers, but in the periphery as well. It is really hard work, and it requires some sort of a cultural change that is going to happen. And I think it's the grassroots that help build that. And by the way, I also want American Jews to think about what it means to live in a complete Jewish society. Okay? We have abandoned the language of our people in a major, major way, okay, in North America. Right? That's a problem. Right? When an American,
what do you mean?
The Hebrew language, I think it's a problem that we don't even have the basic tools. This panel is going on in English under the banner of Zionism. Let's do that. The same thing that we used to talk about. If you want Israelis and Palestinians to talk to them, let's make sure they actually speak the same language and understand the same thing. Well, that's true for Jews as well. And it's something I mourn, and it may be too much of a lift to change that. I'll stop there, but I think that we have a great deal to learn from each other, and it may not be one thing that we can do, tomorrow, a takeaway, but to start thinking about how we export some of the things that we've been successful, and what do we take from the successes of the other.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
There is, just a quick remark. There is more similarity between the Jews in the States and in Israel than you think about it. Because the debate, nowadays there is a big debate about the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Should the language of teaching will be English or it should stay Hebrew? And I came from a family, Rachel know, that were my great-grandfather was the founder of Forward in Yiddish.
Really?
And Levin Epstein. And all the first publishing house, the first Hebrew publishing house in Warsaw was Levin Epstein. And when they came to Israel, they started to work about to make Hebrew the language. And it's a short story. Albert Einstein came in 1923 to Jerusalem. He owned the Nobel over back then, and he came to give the first scientific lecture on Mount Scapus in the Hebrew U. You know this story? And my great-grandfather understood back then that he won't give the lecture in Hebrew. So we should kick him. And my grandfather, there was how you said, Vad Alashon, the committee for the Hebrew language, something like that. That was very military. They started to write letters and etc. And Albert Einstein, at the end, there was a compromise. He came to the Hebrew U in 1923, and he started he spoke in Hebrew 4 sentences. that he's very delighted and blah, 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 and very excited. And he's sorry he cannot speak in the, and then he went to Germany. And that was like the victory. And nowadays, 2 weeks ago, the Senate of the Hebrew U has decided that not in the BA, but in the MA and in doctorate and etc. will be in English. And now
Really?
it's the same debate in Israel. Why? Because if we want the academy to be part of international academy, if we are facing, so it's the same, you see, it's really, the similarity is the same. And once again, I don't want to repeat myself, but Amichai, it's really, you know, I'm as a dean, I have two, I don't have anything, but I'm responsible for 2 ultra-Orthodox campuses. And you know that 10 years ago, you cannot speak about gay rights over there. Nothing. And nowadays, you speak. And another short story, Ruth Bader Ginsburg came to our ultra, she got a prize in Tel Aviv, and she came to, you know, here everyone knows her, right? Yeah, of course. No, in Israel, she was very
Here she's the
unhappy
notorious
to understand
RBG.
that she's not really known in Israel. But that's a different story. And she came and she stood with ultra-Orthodox students and lawyers, and she started to speak, and you know, she's like the liberal, and they are like the conservative, and I said, oh my God, let's hope. And in 2 weeks, she just told them, you know, she saw someone with baby, because in the Orthodox campus, many of them coming with babies. And she said, you know, when I was student, I don't remember in Yale or Harvard, I was the only mother, there was only 9 women among 500 men, something like that, and I was the only mother. And in 2 minutes, it was like a connection between them. And then she said, you know that in Yom Kippur, even though the Supreme Court is sitting, I decided I won't sit. And suddenly it was, and after that, all the liberal values she can spoke about, and she is against gender separation, and they were with her. And it's, you know, so it's, I don't know what I wanted to say by this story, but it's a nice story. But I'm saying, in many ways, we are too close that we can, and you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is Israeli, not as I am, but she can be as I am. And the problem is not speaking Hebrew, is speaking Israeli. And it's not speaking English, it's speaking American. And one should know, you know, I gave lots of workshops here. But when I give workshops, I'm saying, I know nothing about the reality here. I can read, but you have to, you know, to smell it, to feel it in the stomach, and then to understand. And this is the only thing. And once again, it's, Amichai, I have to say that the fact that you find your Judaism here, it's a great failure for us.
I agree.
And I have to say, I never found my Judaism, I never looked for it, you know, and I never heard about the diaspora beside saying that diaspora are those who lose, the losers. The losers are in the diaspora. The others are not part of us. And only in the recent years I'm becoming to learn it, but it's, you know, this is a baby steps.
It's gradual.
And one should give hand to baby steps that he won't fall, and at the same time to give him, you know, a way to walk alone so it could be empowered.
Your favorite word?
Yeah, empowered.
Empowered.
It's out of style. But
If you know how many fundraising I'm
No, believe me. What do you think? I
raised about budgeting and empowering. God heaven.
So I think it's good to have a good story. Actually, I think it's really critical to have a good story because we are so accustomed to our sad stories of not understanding each other and infuriating each other and getting it wrong, that to have a story about a genius, I mean, she's amazing, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, getting it right in a minute and a half to show the human connection that underlies these two communities it's a good story. Thank you.
And by the way, and then she gave tips, and you know, she lives. We all have an internal light. It's true. They say that we all have an eternal light, and she gave tips, and you know, maybe she's genius. I don't know. I know she is, but the tips after when she discovered that they are mothers and she are mothers, and that they are in this phase in their career that like she was, the tips were correct and fitable. So there is even a lesson in that. Mm-hmm. You should see, you understand me?
Right, know who you're talking, know your audience.
Know your audience, and also know the problems of each other, and make something like to look for common, yeah.
So I'm
before
going to push you
collaborations.
guys again and say, in your dream world, what would everybody here walk out and do next week? What would be the perfect outcome after hearing you three inspiring people speak? Anybody can go first. Dream big, blue sky, perfect outcome.
Don't give up. Don't give up on us, on Israelis, really. It is, don't, it's so easy. I'm going back to the opening remark of Amichai. It's so easy to say, okay, it's a fascistic country, and Bibi is the king, and everything is wrong over there, and you know, and BDS. It's so easy to be on this side, because by the way, it's even in our genes. You know, we are on the weak side. Now we are strong, and we are strong in our state. You know, it's confusing. I prefer to be on the other side because I know how to be a victim. I don't know how to be a winner. I don't know the word, but it's not true. And I think that in Israel, even in the government itself, it's not true. So just don't give up. I don't have any, tips and something like that.
I think that's a good one, actually.
I'll follow up on the don't give up. The reason I started off with the comments that I gave about where it hurts is because I know, as somebody who spent many, many times a year in Israel, that the reality is more complex. But what my community, my friends, the media sees is the negation, and it might not be the pervasive voice of Israelis, and even the Israeli government will come and go. It's the power of democracy. But you know, and if not, you ought to know, and many of us know that at this moment, the reality for most diaspora Jews and world Jewry is that Israel is in a moment of transition that is not the most welcoming to the opinion and the grace and the advice of others. That's a moment. That's a reality check. That's what I started with. I'm 100% with you of don't give up. And my suggestions for how not to give up is to identify, if we care, those of us in the room, where do we want to invest our time, our love, our energy, our questioning, our reciprocal conversation. So it could be 100 ways. It could be the traditional way of saying, here's a project I want to get involved with. Lynn, who was sitting here before, decided that she and her husband wanted to involve themselves in the mechinot, in the pre-army programs, and they are heavily invested in this thing. I'm going to call out my two friends who are sitting here, Roni and Naama, who together with other colleagues, Arab and Jewish educators, started a school for refugee children on the island of Lesbos in Greece. As Israelis, Arab and Jewish, who said, what can we do for the refugee crisis? So I got involved with this project because as an Israeli, as a Jew, living in America, I want my children, my community, to know about the school and to support a humanitarian project out of Israel for the sake of refugees. The reason why my community is excited about this project is not because it's just good for the refugees. We got to do something, as people who are refugees, but also because it's a project that came out of Israel. And this is our way to say we are excited about some humanitarian, conscious, great project out of Israel. So if each of us can say, I get the propaganda, I get the shallowness of social media, and how things are very radically presented in the headlines, if I care, what can I get invested in? Maybe it's the Ono Academic Center. Maybe it's stuff that, the reform movement. Maybe whatever it is, but can say...
Maybe it's in Lesbos.
No, for sure. It's an Israeli project in the service of humanity. Can we find a way to say, I care about what's happening in Israel, and I'm going to get engaged in the same way that I get engaged with the civic reality in America and in other things that are happening in the world? Can I allocate a percentage of my time, resources, energy to this bridging of responsibility. And the fact of the matter is the majority of world Jews, certainly American Jews right now, are not prioritizing this relationship because of the bad PR, let's call it. So let's not give up and let's probe underneath the, the veneer of hostility to find a way to get involved.
So 100%, and I'm glad that Amichai said that, and it's obviously much easier to wring your hand than it is to roll up your sleeves and do that. So I'll take it from the klal to the prat, as it were, from the general to the specific. And I'll say, if you walk out of here and do one thing, that is try and break an echo chamber. I spend way too much time talking to people who I know already agree with me. Try and sit down with someone who you know disagrees with you and see, Aleph, where you have the commonality, and bet what you can actually do together. And to try and hear, okay, how did you get to that conclusion? What's bothering you? Not in a patronizing or condescending or antagonistic way, but really in a way of genuine understanding. Because I think that's a lot of where the work has to start. And don't worry if your own views are challenged. I think that's helpful. And I think that when we put the mirror in front of ourselves, why do I think this way? Why do I feel that way? That's. I'm thinking, of course, of the famous Yuval Amichai poem, "The Places Where We Are Right." The Amakom Sheba Anachnu Tzodkim. Right. The rigidity of it. Nothing will grow there. Yeah, exactly.
We could actually have this panel in Hebrew. I just want to say.
Yeah, no, but it will end up in a Beit Asher Nichrav. It will ruin the house, essentially. And so I would say that if we can do one more, find someone, whether it's your family, your friends, your workplace, your community, your congregation, whatever, to sit down and say, listen, we've never actually had this talk, and it's always this taboo, and I find that much more difficult in American society than in Israeli society, where you could call someone at 2 a.m. and have a good argument, a stranger, and so I'll leave that as my challenge.
I have another thing. When Amichai spoke about the school in Lesbos, I keep reminding that we have something that's called Shchenut Tova, good neighborhood, which is part of the IDF, and they did marvelous things over Syria, included military hospital that took care about 5,000 people. They took people to Israeli hospitals inside, and I was very proud to see it. I was one of the monitors. I had a small job over there, and it was like I said, okay, this is the IDF that's going into Syria, sometimes in real risk of life, and saving, babies and mothers and etc. And if you went to Tzfat hospital, I forget the formal name.
Ziv Hospital.
Ziv Hospital. You saw 2 departments full with Syrian people. Amazing. The way, and why I'm telling this story, there is a reason. In this one, there is a reason. That I think that one who give money, donate money or other sources of knowledge shouldn't replace the government. The first, and I'm saying this is great, but the main thing that frightens me all the time is that civil society in Israel will replace the government, and by that will help her, to get rid of all the social responsibilities. So if you give money, knowledge, etc., make sure that it's only for short time until the government that has enough budgets will replace you, and then it will be, institution with, institution for a long run, and not for 2 years, 3 years, and etc. Because what IDF did in Syria that amazed me, that's something that no NGO can do. No. Only the army with all the money and all the doctors and all the hospitals and resources, and it's really amazing. And if you saw it, I don't know if there is in YouTube or something, but if you look at the pictures, in the middle of the night, soldiers going inside Syria every night, not one night for PR, every night for 5 years, and taking care of people and things. And it's only the government could do it. We tried to do it at the beginning. We called it Coalition for Helping Syria, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't very successful until the government did it. So help, but don't let the government not fulfill its responsibilities.
Okay. Do we have, and we can keep talking, but are there any questions, any thoughts to share?
Yes.
Yes?
Great.
That's an excellent example about the IDF in Syria. My question would be, why don't we see it in the American press? And why don't we see that in the mainstream media? That's one of the problems why the American Jews do not understand the reality on the ground, and this growing animosity which is totally out of not understanding and judging instead of understanding. And the big role is the media.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Oh, sorry, I'm after this.
So I want to ask, to my knowledge, where we are in the Bay Area is the largest population of expat Israelis in the U.S. And so somebody please correct me if I'm wrong. So the bridging, it's got to be a double-decker bridge because the Bay Area. So as I'm a Jewish leader in the Bay Area, I work in the social entrepreneurial space. I encounter a lot of cultural Israelis that I'd love to be in dialogue with, and I'm finding it really challenging. Being a woman, all of the issues that are coming, that we're hearing from here. Please don't give up on us. How can we support, as Americans, working in communities that have high Israeli populations? How can we support, the bridge back over? Communicating with people who are here in the community, build community together, start working on these ideas, and be able to have a flex back and forth, because it's not just we, please don't interfere with us over here. The Israeli culture is here. I mean, this building is a testament, this conference is a testament to the Israeli culture that's here. What can we do?
That is a great question.
Great question.
Yeah.
Who would like to address it?
I'll just say, just like I wanted to point out that not all American Jews are the same, not all Israelis are the same, and you go from big city to big city across North America, and you'll see lots of different, very diverse Israeli American communities. One response has been to create an actual organization called the IAC, which some of you may be involved in, and they had a big conference. That's one response. Another response is to first ask, what are the needs? How can we be of help? For instance, in my community in Brooklyn, in the Reform community that I'm just a member of, the Israelis came and said, we're not going to come to shul. We're not going to sit through Kabbat Shabbat and Shabbat morning, but we would like some Shabbat experience. And we created this thing called Shira B'Shishi, where once a month there is sort of Kabbat Shabbat and Kiddush and a big meal. And then there's an Israeli cover band that plays, and 300 people turn up a month. And it's actually not something that I've ever seen in Israel done. But it's those kinds of things. What's a bar and bat mitzvah program look like for an Israeli community? And how do we create that? The secular Beit Midrash that's going to start here at the Ashman Center, I think is a really important step. But how are people celebrating Chagim? And what are the institutions that going? And what does it mean for an Israeli to pay membership dues to something and be actually affiliated? I think those are all really interesting questions. And who do you even talk to? And so I would start by asking what the needs are, and then thinking of okay, how can we come up with creative programming, and could we offer something in Hebrew in our institution to Israelis? I've seen that happen in a few different congregations in Los Angeles, in New York, and in a few other places, Miami, where there's a large Israeli population. So I would just first of all extend the hand and say welcome in.
Thank you. I do just want to acknowledge the frustration that I heard in your question.
Yes.
About not being considered somebody even worth speaking to because of your gender, which is what I heard.
Why is that?
Why is that? I work primarily in the South Bay, and so there's a little bit of a dividing line between what happens in the peninsula and what happens in the South Bay. Tons of options here, not so much down there. And so the feedback that I've gotten in the starting up of this group is, you're a woman, you you wear a kippah, you will never see an Israeli twice. And that has been absolutely true.
So, I mean, I can't offer you advice to change that, but I just wanted to raise that, which I...
Yeah, really important.
I want to say just one thing, and I think I'll go back to my comment about that we are in a paradigm shift, and I've recently been taught to think not as a human, but as a tree, and to be very, very patient. So I think in the same way that German Jewry, when all the Polish Jews came at the beginning of 20th century, took a deep breath and invested in the kids, was a generation later. Israelis who are here who come with the biases of the Judaism I don't go to and what's orthodoxy and feminism, etc. It's shifting slowly. I totally understand and empathize with the sense of like, how can you possibly be a rabbi or how can this be Jewish? It's not what I know and I don't go to, but I will go to. I think we need to invest, this sounds almost idiotic, but we need to invest in the very young so that the next generation is,
You're telling me to leave them in the desert?
that's sort of,
Is what you're telling me?
I'm saying let's not cut our losses, but let's prioritize, and we need to do a lot of investment in young and next.
And I will tell you, this is a theme that I've heard from multiple different people I've spoken to over the past couple of days about projects that are engaging people now. And they all, the common thread is the long timeline. Because it is a moment of transition past, the country was created, the country was defended. Okay, now it's there. Okay, take a deep breath, now what? And it seems like it's very frustrating to live in human time and know that we're talking about tree time in terms of change.
Yes. Right.
But you're not the only person to have said it. Are there any other, are we out of time? I don't know, we got a couple minutes
5
left.
minutes, sorry.
Yes.
I have a dilemma, and I'll share it, and I'll be really honest with the hope of not hurting anybody's feelings. But I've been here in the United States for 30 years. I've been in Jewish education. I've run education in a conservative synagogue. And I called myself a Zionist then, and I'm calling myself a Zionist today, and I will be Zionist forever. And the things that to me is the most challenging is not when we deal with the social issues in Israel, and even the spirituality that they are not familiar with. But to me, what has been unpleasant for me, and therefore I refrain from getting into these conversations, is about the security, the military, and I think I've heard, and I'm not from the Bay Area, I'm from Portland, Oregon, and that to me is challenging, and I do not want to be engaged in a conversation with anybody who tells me what Israel should do for their security, to keep them safe. And it really bothers me to the point where I disengage from that.
You are not alone.
And yes, I'm not alone. But then, we're talking today about how we make peace and how bridges. And Rabbi Infeld said before in a different session that we are not talking about that there's two nations really. There's the nation of Israel and there's the nation of America. And there is some kind of point in that. It's like אנחנו לא אותו דבר. So the question is, how do we bridge bridges? Which is exactly what you were saying. And there's some things that there needs to be a red line at some point. And you say, this is not where we're going. And how much can we bend over to reach and bridge without losing our own spine? And that to me is a really, it's a serious matter.
נכון.
Totally right. That's the good question.
משני הצדדים זה נכון.
How do you build bridges, right?
נכון.
A bridge, there's somewhere in the middle, and there's this base, that base. I'm not going to get intervening in your conservative school in Portland, Oregon. If you invite me to come and consult, to come and visit, to come and think, great. But if not, who the hell am I from New York City to come and tell you what to do in Portland? Unless we agree, for whatever reason, to maybe disagree and work together. And I think what's happening here and what's happening in this conversation, and that so-called Israelis, and by the way, the Israeli government is not present in this conference, but representatives of Israeli society and representatives of American Jewish society are saying, let's agree that we need a bridge. Because right now what's working isn't really working. It's hostile and it's problematic, and it's over many issues. So the question is really, and I think that's what the plenary in a bit is going to be, and all of tomorrow is, what does it take to take a step back so we can take a step ahead? Because right now it isn't really working.
Thank you for your remark.
Thank you. I think one more, last one?
My concern was how to define a way to engage. I recognize Israelis, I'm part of that. I want to engage the American youth, Jewish youth, to be involved, to get to know and become Zionists at the heart, that they would not say, my parents are so disappointed, I don't want to even get engaged in them. I want to target them. And I know that some of our programs here are fantastic, but I think we need to create a new way of Judaism that will get them excited about Judaism, Zionism, and getting involved with Israel on their own level.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I think that you share that concern with many, many people, for sure. This is going to sound self-serving, but I'm the CEO of The Forward. We reach 1.5 million readers a month, but a third of them are under 35. So where I see the most interest from young Jews in America is in what The Forward does. I mean, obviously I'm at The Forward every day, that's what I know, but we have independent journalism and cultural celebration together. And what I'm hearing from young people, and that this is actually relevant beyond The Forward, that's how I understand it. But what I am hearing from young people, and I heard just last night, is, oh my gosh, I love The Forward. You're not afraid of addressing the hard topics. And I think a lot of organizations are very wary of these really challenging topics of security and BDS and identity and race and Judaism and having issues with the Israeli government. And I can tell you that the strategy of not talking about the difficult issues because they're difficult does not work to engage young people. I don't have a ton of advice beyond that, but I will say that young people are interested in a real conversation.
Yeah, can I just, first of all, it's a great question, and I think it's the question that every Jewish educator is asking themselves, and I can't tell you how many meetings I go to where the majority of white-haired people are asking, why are there no young people here? And that's, great. So let's just divide what we mean by young people. If we're talking about millennials or if we're talking about 3-year-olds, because I think it's different. I think each is actually really worth investing in both ways and sort of building up a comprehensive model of engagement and education throughout. I think for the millennial crowd right now, and here I'll mansplain to the millennial crowd what I think they need to hear right now, is it, no, basically they have, Hasgvara is a word in Hebrew. Hasgvara.
Okay.
Yeah. Is basically like this. I think there's a short attention span, but a high demand to cut through any sort of BS. And so if we're asked to not talk about the things that they feel terribly passionate about, right, then I think that the message that they'll get is that you don't want us in this conversation at all. You don't want us. And yes, there have to be red lines. I'm sort of connecting these 2 points. Yes, there have to be red lines, right? And yeah, it doesn't matter because you're not voting anyway, in Israel. But, okay, here's how we see things. And if you want us to be engaged, right, then you have to do things that both have impact and that are going to be real. I think there is a high detection for what we would call hasbara right now, and I could even give a cynical response to what Yuval said. Like, that is amazing what's going on between Ziv Hasvel and Syria. Okay, and I can give you some other examples of incredible things. However, that doesn't mean that the bad stuff is also not happening. Right? So people say, okay, great, I love that Israel invented the cherry tomato, and drip irrigation is the solution for agriculture. Okay? However, there's an occupation. Okay, and so look at the generation that's looking at those things and saying, okay, you want us to come to Israel? Well, what kind of a trip is it going to be? All right? What are we going to see? And then what are we going to talk about? How are we going to process that? All right? Is it going to be the same trip that my parents went on? Yes or no? Okay, and I think there's a lesser priority right now to pay for things and be members of things and to do things that cause it. We're looking at an a la carte model for Jewish education in general. So how we can fight that, or we can try to adapt ourselves and do that. And I'm sort of in the middle of both. Right. And so these are really difficult questions, not only for the Israel conversation, but yes, we require a radical shift in what we're doing for the next generation, and we have to modernize it. And we also have to be true to what we are.
Once again, it's the same problem in Israel. And we had the same problem with our young people. And after that, all the mechinat, before the army, we started to understand that the young people wants to speak about it, about the occupation, about the Palestinians that, by the way, are not here. All the Zionist movement since the beginning spoke about the Palestinian. They weren't neglected. There was a program for them, to build, to buy, to make a different two-state solution from the beginning. Here we are speaking about Zionist movement for 2 days. Now the first day, no Palestinian is here. True. Right? But once again, it's the same thing. By the way, it's all over. I've been working in Nepal and in India, and now in Thailand. It's problem of the young people all over. They are not interested in anything. It's now they are afraid. But once again, in Israel, when we started to speak about the real thing, about occupation, and it's not so easy. It's not an easy, to get out from the occupied territories, and the peace will be, and etc. etc. And of course, then once again, and we have the army. Once again, they became more involved. And I have to say that in Israel now, we have something that we didn't have in 10 years ago, like 20, 30 years old activists living in what they call the new kibbutz, living in new movements, something tremendous. They are coming to study at us, and they are all their life are for social justice, and they are much more committed than we are, in my opinion. So it gives hopes.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you everyone. Thank you.
Diaspora,
מה ביחד שלך?